Who is the most stupid person you have ever met? My best friend divorced her husband, Kevin. Kevin proposed 5 weeks after their first date. Maybe my best friend was a bit of a Kevin too for saying yes at that point. It's hard for me to accurately describe Kevin. He is one of those hyper-masculine manly men who doesn't know how to be masculine. He liked to take any opportunity to bring up in conversation that he was a black belt. I remember the first time he said it because I asked, "Oh yeah, in what?" And he looked at me like I was an idiot. "In martial arts." "Oh right. Of course." He also would talk at length about how much he worked out. Turns out, he didn't actually work out at all. He liked to think of himself as a car guy, because he had a sports car he couldn't afford and treated it like his baby. He didn't actually know anything about cars, but he had one. So car guy. But the thing that really got up my nose about the guy was that he prided himself on how very smart he was. He'd make the most outrageous claims with the most pig-headed certainty. He just knew these things were true, and if you disagreed, even if you showed actual physical proof that he was wrong, he'd just condescendingly tell you that you didn't understand these things like he did and go on with his idiocy. He once declared that you can't break the law at night. What exactly does that mean? We still don't know. He wouldn't elaborate. As a second example, he had trouble getting a fire going in their fireplace when he was home alone one day. His solution? Mix up some homemade napalm from a recipe he found on the internet. It was a huge disaster, setting the kitchen on fire. Luckily my friend arrived home in time to grab the fire extinguisher. Yet he insisted doggedly that he knew what he was doing, and really this was the best way to get the fireplace going, and obviously she just didn't understand because she didn't know as much about this stuff as he did. Kevin was a religious nut. Kevin was a crazy person who used religion as his MO. He would randomly proclaim, "The Bible says," to support whatever other crazy thing he'd said. Most people let him get away with it, because the Bible is really long and says a lot of crazy stuff. But I was raised going to church twice a week, once upon a time. So I knew a bit about that particular book, and I had a pathological need when I was younger to call people on their bullcrap. So we often butted heads. Unsurprisingly, when confronted, Kevin could never actually tell you where in the Bible it said you shouldn't take the first slice of pizza. Yep, he said that, but it didn't decrease his certainty that it was in there. So, as anyone but the two of them could have predicted, the marriage didn't last. He became increasingly erratic, forbidding her from speaking to friends including me, because the Bible says so. Laying hands on her, because the Bible says she has to do whatever he says and that he's allowed to hurt her if she doesn't. So she left, and here is where the wackiest Kevin-ing begins. She gets a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings, and the first thing that comes up is the house. They bought the house from his parents. More precisely, she bought the house from his parents. He had terrible credit. As a result, his name wasn't on anything related to the house. He also had no job, meaning he'd never made a single payment on the house. As far as she saw it, the house was hers. His mother, who came into town to support her son through his misfortune, didn't see it that way. They declared that the house still belonged to the mother and threw all of my friend's stuff out on the lawn. Friend's lawyer gets a preliminary hearing date set up, to determine the initial dispersion of important stuff like the house, at least until the divorce proceedings get all sorted. So friend's lawyer says to Kevin, "Have your lawyer contact me to set up a meeting before the hearing." A meeting is set up, and who arrives at the lawyer's office but Kevin, dressed in jeans and a windbreaker, and a fake mustache, claiming to be Mr. Steele, the lawyer. I kid you not. He decided he'd be his own lawyer and he'd call himself Mr. Steele. When the time for the hearing came, Kevin was once again acting as his own attorney. This time I can only assume he wasn't working under a pseudonym. Kevin and his mother arrived 20 minutes late, not at all dressed for court, casual jeans and shirts. The first thing he says when he walks in is, "Can I approach the bench?" "Why?" the judge asks. "Because I have some receipts." So friend gets called to the stand. Her lawyer asks a bunch of questions illustrating just how crazy Kevin is and how bad things had gotten in about the house and stuff. Then Kevin, since he's the lawyer, gets to cross-examine. His first question: "Is it not true that you were laid hands on as a child?" Her lawyer: "Objection." The judge: "Sustained." The question had nothing to do with anything. Other questions included: "Is it not true that you were seeing a psychiatrist and on medication for depression?" No. It's not true. She'd never seen a mental health professional. Not sure if he thought he might trick her into lying on that one or if he was so crazy that he actually thought it was true. He asked a bunch of other ridiculous questions, which her lawyer let him ask because they were completely out of nowhere and just helped prove to the judge how nuts he was. Then he takes the stand. Her lawyer gets him to admit to pretty much everything they said he did, because it was all true, but he refuses to give specific answers to some of the more serious questions. Not no. Just doesn't want to give specifics. Then he gets to make a statement. His statement is how he doesn't want a divorce and also she was abusive to him, such as pinching him once when they were on the highway. Also, the Bible says that she's his wife. So she has to do whatever he wants, and that divorce is bad. How can the judge make them get a divorce when the Bible says not to? Apparently he went on in this vein for a while. Needless to say, the initial hearing did not go his way. She ended up getting the house in the short term and a protective order against him after he admitted in court to his violence against her. After this, he dragged his feet at every point of the process. For more than 6 months, he wouldn't show up to things or would refuse to sign things until the last possible moment. He moved to a different city and apparently joined the Army Reserve. When friend found out about this, her lawyer contacted someone there to point out that he wasn't allowed to be around weapons or something like that because of the protective order. The lawyer even contacted him and offered to drop the protective order so he could stay and if he just agreed to finish the divorce proceedings in a timely manner. Kevin refused. In the end, he got pretty much nothing and quietly disappeared.